Jimin abruptly exits a live podcast after a shocking question about Jungkook's tattoo sparks tension. What secret was he hiding? Did Jungkook get that tattoo because of you? The room froze. The host's voice echoed awkwardly, hanging in the studio air like smoke, refusing to dissipate. A beat of silence followed a silence so dense it crushed the casual energy that had filled the space minutes before. Jimin blinked. Once. Twice. His lips parted slightly, but no sound came out. His jaw clenched. The podcast set, once warm with dim amber lighting and cozy laughter, now felt clinical surgical. A tension rippled through the small crew behind the cameras. The co-host, clearly panicked, shuffled his note cards and mumbled something inaudible. The sound technician stopped tapping his keyboard. Even the blinking red live light seemed to hesitate. Jimin's gaze dropped to his lap, the tip of his tongue pressing against the inside of his cheek. His fingers twitched. The silver rings on his right hand glinted under the studio lights. A single breath escaped his lips, quiet, deliberate. Then he stood. "Thank you for having me," he said, voice low and calm, but trembling with a heat that hinted at something volcanic underneath. "Jimin, wait, are you okay?" the host blurted out, fumbling to recover. Jimin didn't respond. He adjusted his black denim jacket, eyes still avoiding everyone in the room, and walked out without another word. The door closed behind him with a click that echoed louder than the question. Outside, the sky was moody, gray, with hints of violet. Rain threatened. Jimin stood in the alley beside the building, breathing in the smell of asphalt and dampness. The street noise barely touched him. For a long time, he just stood there, his hand pressed to the center of his chest as if steadying something inside him. It wasn't the question itself that broke him. It was how fast it transported him back to the night in Busan 2 years ago. That night, the rooftop, the heat of July, and Jungkook's voice, soft but broken. "Then let me carry it, even if you can't say it out loud." The tattoo had been his answer, but no one ever asked the right question. Until now, back inside the building, chaos stirred. Producers argued. Fans flooded the live chat with confusion and speculation. Someone whispered into a mic, "Should we cut the feed?" Another person said, "Too late. It's already trending." Jimin walks out. Jungkook tattoo question. What is he hiding? It wasn't supposed to go this way. The interview was part of his carefully timed comeback, a solo project, soft and mature, meant to show the world he had evolved, that he was in control now. But the past had its own gravity, and it didn't care for his plans. Jimin climbed into the black SUV, waiting by the curb. The driver didn't speak. The silence between them was understood. As the car pulled away, Jimin leaned his head against the cool glass, watching raindrops begin to blur the city lights into streaks of melted neon. Somewhere on the other side of the city, Jungkook was likely asleep. Or maybe not. He had always been a night owl. Maybe he had already seen the clip. Maybe he was watching it on repeat. Jimin closed his eyes. He wasn't angry. He was tired and terrified, because he knew this wasn't just a viral moment. It was a crack, a fault line, and everything he had buried, pain, truth, promises, was threatening to rise. Not because of a tattoo, but because it had never been just ink, and it had never just been friendship. And now, the world was beginning to notice. The night hadn't ended. Jimin's phone hadn't stopped buzzing since he left the studio. Hundreds of notifications, missed calls from staff, his manager, and even from Namjoon. But the one name he feared seeing the most hadn't appeared. Not a single word from Jungkook. The SUV stopped at a private penthouse hotel downtown Seoul. Security greeted him, and the elevator ride was silent, save for the distant hum of rain pounding against the glass windows. As he stepped into the suite, he collapsed onto the couch, still dressed in his studio outfit, his hands buried in his hair. He hadn't meant to walk out like that. He hadn't planned to trigger a firestorm. But that question had felt like a knife to the ribs, one too familiar, too sharp, too close to what he still couldn't name out loud. Suddenly, the door buzzed. His head snapped up. Not the phone, not a call. The door. He froze. No one should have known where he was. His team wasn't supposed to leak the location. Slowly, he approached the door. The screen showed a single person standing in the hallway, hoodie pulled up, head bowed low. Jungkook. Jimin's breath hitched. He opened the door. The younger man stepped in without saying a word, brushing past Jimin like he belonged there, as if no time had passed. He pulled the hood down. His dark hair was damp, sticking to his forehead. His eyes were unreadable. "Why didn't you answer your phone?" Jungkook asked flatly. "You saw it?" Jimin said, his voice a rasp. Jungkook laughed, a dry, bitter sound. "You mean the viral moment where you storm out like a K-drama lead after someone says something real?" "Yeah, I saw it." Jimin flinched. "It wasn't planned. I didn't know they'd bring you up." "And what if they did?" Jungkook stepped closer. "What if I am part of your story? Do I get edited out?" Jimin turned his face away. "You don't understand." "Then make me understand," Jungkook shouted, voice cracking under the weight of anger barely restrained. "Tell me what's so shameful about me, about us, that you can't even sit through one damn question." Jimin's eyes shimmered. "It's not about shame. It's about survival." Jungkook stood there, stunned. "You think I don't want to answer them?" Jimin whispered. "You think I haven't dreamt of being honest? I live in a world that doesn't let people like us exist, not without paying a price." The silence that followed was unbearable. Jungkook's voice softened. "You think I haven't paid that price already?" His hand went to his arm. He rolled up the sleeve slowly, exposing the tattoo, the one everyone had speculated about, the one that started it all. It was faded now, healed over, but the ink still pulsed with meaning. Jimin stepped forward, eyes glued to it. "You did that after I left Busan. You left," Jungkook said, voice shaking. "You left after everything. After that night." Jimin's lips trembled. "I was scared." "Of me?" "Of loving you." The words hung in the air like thunder. Jungkook looked like he'd been slapped. For a moment, it felt like the storm outside had poured straight into the room. Then, slowly, his face twisted, not in anger, but in pain. "I waited," Jungkook whispered. "You said you needed time." "I gave you years, Hyung." Jimin closed the distance between them but didn't touch him. "I'm not asking for forgiveness, I don't know how to fix this." "You don't fix something by pretending it never broke," Jungkook said, pulling away. The room buzzed again. Jimin's phone on the counter flashed. "Heap a statement to be released in 10 minutes." Jimin swallowed hard. He grabbed the phone. "They're going to spin it," he muttered. "Say it was fatigue. Maybe some anxiety. Scripted. Neutral." Jungkook crossed his arms. "You're going to let them?" Jimin's eyes lifted. "What would you have me say? That it was real?" "Then they'll ask what's real," Jimin said. "And I'll have to lie. Again." The silence was the answer. Jungkook stepped back, his expression guarded. "Maybe it's easier for you this way. Maybe that's what you've always wanted to keep me locked behind some poetic metaphor." "That's not fair," Jimin said quietly. "No," Jungkook replied, heading toward the door. "What's not fair is giving someone a reason to hope, and then running every time the world dares to look." He opened the door, the hallway light casting a golden glow over his features. For a brief second, he turned back. "They weren't wrong, you know," he said. "The tattoo was because of you." The door closed behind him, and Jimin stood there, heart splintered, surrounded by silence thicker than grief. The rain outside turned violent, drumming against the windows like fists demanding entry. Inside, he finally let the tears fall. But outside, the world had already decided. Jimin walk out. Jungkook real. Tattoo truth. The press storm was coming. And this time, no amount of silence would be enough to drown it. "They're calling it the tattoo confession." Taehyung's voice cut through the silence like a scalpel, precise and cold. He stood at the edge of the meeting room, one hand shoved into the pocket of his gray wool coat, the other clutching his phone. His jaw was clenched. His eyes scanned the room, lingering on Jimin, who sat at the center table with his head down, surrounded by a circle of Hybe executives. "Has he responded to it?" one of the executives asked. "No," Taehyung replied. "He hasn't posted. He hasn't denied it. And you know what that means in this industry? It means it's real." The murmurs around the table turned into noise. Legal advisors, PR specialists, and media managers tossed words into the air like smoke grenades. Containment, rebranding, public image, brand risk, sponsorship fallout. Jimin hadn't spoken for 15 minutes. He just sat there, knuckles pale, a single sweat drop sliding down the side of his temple. The fluorescent lights above made everything too harsh, too exposed. There was no safe corner in this room. Every eye was on him, dissecting his silence, interpreting it, weaponizing it. "Jimin," the PR head finally said, her tone sharp but trying to be gentle. "We need to finalize the statement before this gets worse. Right now, rumors are outpacing us. TikTok edits, thread dissections, fan theories. Some of them even link you and Jungkook to—" "Don't," Jimin whispered, his voice barely audible. The room quieted. He looked up slowly, eyes red but dry, like a fire that had already burned through the house and left only ash. "Don't say his name like that, like it's a threat." The PR head blinked, then set her clipboard down. "Jimin, listen. I understand that you're going through something emotional, but you're not just you anymore. You're a brand. You're part of a global empire. We can't afford a scandal this close to your comeback." "Then cancel it," Jimin said. Silence again. "You don't mean that," said a voice from across the table. It was Bang PD, calm and careful like always. He leaned forward. "This isn't just about a moment. It's about your career, about everything we built." Jimin's gaze sharpened. "Did we build it on honesty or convenience?" The room tensed. Taehyung walked toward him slowly. "Bro, think carefully. This isn't just a personal storm. You open one door, you'll have to open them all. Are you ready for that?" "I don't know," Jimin whispered. "But I'm done lying." Taehyung held his stare, a mixture of fear and respect flickering behind his dark eyes. "Then prepare to burn with it." 2 hours later, Jimin stepped into the hallway alone, leaving behind a silence that felt final. As he reached the elevator, his phone buzzed. One message. From unknown. Check the mirror. Confused, he glanced around. No one. Then he turned toward the restroom beside the conference hall. He pushed the door open, heart thudding. Inside, the walls were clean, sterile, white tiles, too bright. But on the mirror, written in black Sharpie, just above the sink, "You told me once you'd never run again. Was that a lie too?" His chest clenched. It was Jungkook's handwriting. Fast, angled, desperate. Jimin stared at it, unmoving, as memories clawed their way up from beneath his skin, the rooftop in Busan. Jungkook's voice shaking when he said, "Don't promise me something you can't survive." The sound of his heartbeat when their hands first brushed in the dark. When nothing had been defined, only felt. He pulled out his phone, opened his notes app. His fingers trembled, but he typed, "Do you want me to say it out loud? Come to the park tonight. Midnight, you know the one." He didn't send it right away. He stared at the words, thought about the chaos outside, the chaos inside. Then he hit send. 12 hours later, the world broke. Jimin and Jungkook trended at #1. The clip of Jungkook's last performance resurfaced him, whispering, "For you, always," into the mic before walking off stage, tattoo exposed. A radio DJ made a joke about them being the K-pop Romeo and Juliet. Hybe's official statement dropped at 5:03 p.m. Park Jimin is currently resting due to personal health matters. We ask for understanding and privacy. No further comment will be made. Fans weren't stupid. They knew what health matters meant. And still, no word from Jungkook. Until 11:59 p.m., Jimin arrived at the park. The moon was high, partially veiled by clouds. The swing sets creaked in the night breeze. The park was empty, hauntingly familiar. The old trees still stood like quiet witnesses to things no one else knew. He sat on the bench, waited, heart ticking like a bomb. 1 minute passed, then another. Then, footsteps. Jungkook emerged from the shadows, hoodie low, hands in pockets. He stopped 5 feet away, didn't speak. Jimin stood. "You came," he said. Jungkook's eyes burned into him. "You shouldn't have called me." "But I did. You said we couldn't survive this." "I was wrong." A beat of silence. Then Jungkook asked, "What changed?" Jimin stepped closer. "I did." The wind rustled the trees. Somewhere, a car passed, distant and irrelevant. Jungkook reached into his pocket, pulled something out, a small envelope. He handed it over. Jimin opened it. Inside was a photo. 2 boys, laughing under fireworks. One had his eyes shut. The other had his arm draped around his shoulder, their faces glowing in the light. That night, Busan. On the back, one sentence scribbled, "I never needed you to say it. I just needed you to mean it." Jimin's throat tightened. "Do you still—" "Don't." Jungkook cut him off. "Don't ask me if I still love you." Jimin's breath hitched. Jungkook stepped back, turning away. Because the answer won't matter unless you're ready to fight for it. And then he was gone. Again. Jimin stood there, wind howling through the trees like the scream he couldn't let out. The storm had only just begun. And this time, he wasn't running. The world didn't sleep. The morning air buzzed with urgency. Headlines screamed across digital front pages, and fan forums exploded like firecrackers. A private video had surfaced unlisted, grainy, but unmistakably real. Two voices. A rooftop. One laughing, the other saying, "Don't ever disappear on me again." The voices were Jimin and Jungkook. The video wasn't supposed to exist, let alone be seen by millions. Jimin sat on the floor of his apartment, knees drawn to his chest, television muted but flashing coverage of the leaked video confirming intimacy between BTS members. His phone vibrated violently beside him. It had been doing that for the past 3 hours. He hadn't picked it up once. Then it stopped. Only one name made the screen light up again. Jungkook. He didn't hesitate. He picked up. "You saw it?" Jungkook's voice was low, but there was fire behind it. Jimin swallowed hard. "Yeah, that video was from my phone." The silence that followed was knife-thin. "I didn't leak it," Jungkook added, voice tight. "I know," Jimin replied immediately. There was a pause, a mutual understanding. Whatever storm was coming now, neither of them had lit this particular fuse. "They're going to crucify us," Jungkook said, quieter this time. "They already are." A beat. "I'm sorry," Jungkook added, and it sounded like it cost him everything to say. "For what?" "For that night, for the tattoo, for hoping you'd choose me, even in a world that doesn't let us exist." Jimin closed his eyes. "You didn't do anything wrong. I just wasn't strong enough." Another silence. But this time, it was thicker, heavier. Jungkook sighed. "We don't have the luxury of privacy anymore." The line went dead. Jimin stared at his phone, then hurled it across the room. It hit the wall with a crash that wasn't nearly satisfying enough. The apartment door burst open 5 minutes later. Taehyung stormed in without knocking, holding a tablet in one hand and a look of betrayal in the other. "You didn't tell me," he hissed. "Tell you what?" "That you were in love with him, Jimin." Jimin blinked, stunned by the rawness in Taehyung's voice. "You think I wouldn't find out eventually? You think I wouldn't recognize that rooftop? I was there the next morning, you idiot." Jimin's mouth opened, then closed. "I didn't know how to explain." "No, you just didn't trust me." "I was trying to protect everyone," Jimin snapped, standing. "Bullshit," Taehyung shot back. "You were protecting yourself. You thought if no one knew, it wouldn't be real. That you could pretend it didn't mean everything. It was never supposed to go this far," Jimin whispered, tears suddenly threatening to spill. "I didn't mean to hurt anyone." "You didn't mean to hurt Jungkook either. But look at him now," Taehyung said. "He's getting hate from every direction. He's alone in this." Jimin gritted his teeth. "I'm alone too, Tae." "No, you're hiding," Taehyung said. "He's the only one standing in the fire." The words hit harder than any headline. Suddenly, the tablet in Taehyung's hand buzzed. He looked down at it and swore. "What?" Jimin asked. "Hybe's holding an emergency press conference. In 3 hours." "What for?" Taehyung hesitated. "To announce disciplinary action." Jimin froze. "Against who?" Taehyung didn't answer. Jimin ran past him, grabbed his coat, and slammed the door behind him. Outside, the city was chaotic. Reporters camping in front of Hybe, protesters with placards demanding transparency, fans arguing violently on live streams. Cars honked, paparazzi swarmed, but none of it mattered. Jimin burst into the Hybe building and into the executive meeting room where Bang PD stood, arms crossed, surrounded by advisors, lawyers, and PR managers. The room fell into stunned silence. "You're not punishing him," Jimin said flatly. Bang PD's brows raised. "That's not your decision." "Yes, it is," Jimin said. "Because if you do, I walk." The words hit the room like a sledgehammer. "You walk?" One advisor echoed in disbelief. "You'd destroy your career over this?" Bang PD asked carefully. Jimin didn't flinch. "It's already destroyed. The only thing left is my integrity." One of the PR agents leaned forward. "Jimin, think rationally. Your fan base is still salvageable. We can still contain—" "I'm done being contained," Jimin cut in. "You think you own my story. You don't. I do." He turned to the room, voice rising. "You all knew for years we weren't just friends. You let it slide as long as it was silent. Now, you want to hang him out to dry because someone else lit the match? No. If he falls, I fall with him. The room erupted into arguments, warnings, threats. But Jimin didn't hear any of it, because across the room, a familiar voice spoke. You don't have to fall. Everyone turned. Jungkook stood in the doorway, eyes bloodshot, voice steady. I'm done hiding too. Jimin stared at him. Jungkook stepped into the room and reached for Jimin's hand. Their fingers clasped, not trembling, not ashamed, just real. Bang PD exhaled. You realize what you're doing. We're living, Jungkook said. The silence was suffocating. Then Taehyung appeared behind them, arms folded. Well, if you're both getting burned, might as well add fuel. And slowly, one by one, the room cracked. People stood, advisors left. Some shook their heads, but others looked just for a second moved. Jimin knew the war wasn't over, but for the first time in years, he didn't feel afraid, he felt free. The backlash came like a tidal wave, fast, loud, and merciless. By dawn, 3 major brands had dropped Jimin as their ambassador. 2 networks pulled interviews featuring Jungkook from their upcoming schedules. A popular variety show issued a vague statement about reassessing its guest lineups in light of recent controversies. A hashtag began to trend worldwide. Boycott Jungkook. The timing wasn't coincidental. Inside the silence of Jungkook's apartment, the only sound came from the steady dripping of the kitchen faucet. He stood motionless in front of the TV as talking heads debated his future like a game of chess. This is unprecedented, one host said. Some fans feel betrayed, another offered with a thin smile. The company is cornered. If they don't act fast, they risk total brand collapse. Click. Jungkook turned off the screen. He leaned against the counter, arms crossed, eyes blank. There was a knock. Jungkook opened the door without asking who it was. Jimin stepped inside, hoodie pulled up, face drawn but determined. For a moment, they just looked at each other. No need for greetings. Everything was already said in the silence. They dropped me, Jimin said softly. I know. They dropped you too. I figured. Jimin lowered his hood and exhaled. This was supposed to be about truth, not destruction. Jungkook's jaw tensed. It was never going to be easy. Not like this, Jimin whispered. You still want to go back? Jimin snapped, eyes flashing. Don't ask me that. Not after everything I've lost. Then don't act like you regret it. I don't regret you, Jimin said, voice cracking. I regret that this world still tears people apart for telling the truth. Jungkook closed the distance, lowering his voice. So what now? We become martyrs? No, Jimin said. We become louder. There was a flicker of something in Jungkook's eyes. Not hope yet, but a crack in the bitterness. A space where hope could live. Jimin pulled out his phone. I'm going live. Jungkook stared. What? Instagram. Now. No script. Just me. Us. The truth. You sure? Jungkook asked. No, Jimin admitted. But I'm tired of other people telling our story for us. Jungkook hesitated for only a second, then nodded. Let's burn it all down. Jimin hit go live. The screen lit up. Thousands of viewers joined in the first few seconds. Within a minute, the count passed 1 million. He sat on the couch, camera angled directly at his face. Jungkook sat beside him, close, but not touching. Not yet. Jimin began to speak. His voice was soft, but every word was clear. I want to start by saying, I'm not sorry for who I am. I'm not ashamed of the people I love. I know what's being said about me, about us. The chat exploded, with hearts and tears and fire emojis. Support, anger, questions. Jungkook leaned in, his turn. Some of you feel hurt, betrayed, like we lied. And maybe we did, for a while, but we had no choice. Now we do, Jimin said. So here it is. No labels, no PR filters, just truth. There was a long pause. Then Jimin reached for Jungkook's hand, their fingers interlaced. On camera, in front of millions. We were never just friends, Jimin said. That sentence sent shockwaves across the globe. Within minutes, articles were being written. News alerts, pinged phones, screenshots circulated. Edits were already being made by fans, set to melancholic ballads and protest anthems. But the boys weren't done. Jungkook's voice was raw. I got the tattoo for him. It wasn't art. It was memory. It was a promise. Jimin glanced at him, visibly shaken, but didn't look away. And I broke it, he said. I disappeared when I should have stayed. But I'm done running. This is me staying. The comment section split into a war zone. Some screamed betrayal. Others wrote essays in defense. Celebrities started commenting subtle emojis, hearts, cryptic messages. One message stood out, live your truth. Proud of you, Hobie Yoch. Jimin smiled. We know not everyone will support us. We're not asking for that. We're just asking you to let us live. After 15 minutes, they ended the stream. Then silence. Then a knock. Jungkook and Jimin froze. It wasn't a fan. It wasn't a delivery. It was Yoongi. He stepped inside without permission. Dark cap low, coat soaked from the rain. What the hell did you just do? He asked. Jimin stood his ground. Told the truth. Yoongi stared at them, then shut the door behind him. He walked into the kitchen, opened the fridge, grabbed a bottle of water, and took a long sip. Then he said, Good. Jungkook blinked. You're not pissed? Oh, I'm furious, Yoongi replied. But not at you. At the world that made you think hiding was the only way to survive. Jimin exhaled, shoulders collapsing in relief. Yoongi looked at them both. This changes everything. You know that, right? We're counting on it, Jungkook said. Yoongi nodded. Then prepare for war. The phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't hate. It was love. A message from Jin, serving in the military. You've never disappointed me. Stand tall, brothers. And then another, from Namjoon. We'll handle the noise. You just keep being loud. Outside, the world still burned. But inside, for the first time in years, Jimin and Jungkook felt something dangerously close to peace. Not because they were safe, but because they were finally seen. Thunder echoed over Seoul as the city prepared for another chaotic day. But inside the Hybe headquarters, the storm had already begun. Jimin walked into the conference room with his manager trailing behind him, face pale, clutching a folder filled with bullet-pointed damage reports. Jungkook was already seated, arms folded tightly across his chest, jaw locked. His eyes were hard-focused, but unreadable. At the head of the table sat a circle of executives, lawyers, and board members. None of them smiled. Some of them wouldn't meet their eyes. Bang PD entered last. He didn't sit. He paced once, then turned to face the room with a heavy sigh. I want everyone to hear this clearly, he said. This is not about disapproval. This is about damage control. Damage control, Jimin repeated, voice brittle with disbelief. You mean salvaging your partnerships? The PR director cut in quickly. It's about public perception, Jimin. And numbers. Always numbers. Jungkook's chair scraped sharply as he stood. You should have just said it. You want us to apologize. That's why we're here, isn't it? A few glances darted across the table. We're asking, said a female executive gently, for a statement. One that eases the pressure. One that reminds people you're still what? Jungkook snapped. Sellable? Safe? Straight? The room went silent. No one dared respond. Jimin stood too, slow and deliberate. So that's the line we're still afraid to cross. You say it's about protecting us, but what you really mean is protecting the illusion. Bang PD's voice was calm, but cold. We're not villains. We're realists. You went live without approval. You exposed a relationship the company had no context for. That comes with consequences. Context? Jimin laughed bitterly. You mean control. A legal advisor finally spoke up. Gentlemen, your contracts are still active. There are clauses that if challenged could open a case for breach of image rights. Moral clauses, even defamation. Moral? Jungkook said slowly. You want to talk about morality now? Everyone flinched. I was 17, he continued, eyes locked on the legal advisor. When I first kissed him. When I first realized I wasn't like the version of myself the world kept cheering for. And instead of helping me understand that, helping us navigate it, you told us to hide. And now you want a press statement to undo what's already been lived? Jimin's voice came low, dangerous. We're not backing down. Bang PD rubbed his temples. We aren't asking you to break up, just soften the optics. You want us to lie prettier, Jimin said. Yes, Bang PD replied, finally dropping all pretense. Jungkook laughed, then bitter, disbelieving. Then you'd better prepare another live broadcast because I'm going to burn every deal that demands we be something we're not. The meeting imploded into shouts. Advisors began talking over one another, PR managers argued. Phones buzzed. Somewhere in the background, someone mentioned stock drops. Someone else mentioned international backlash. Amid the chaos, Jimin and Jungkook walked out. They didn't look back. Outside the building, the sky cracked open with rain. Cameras flashed. Reporters shouted their names. Microphones were thrust forward. Questions flew like bullets. Are you still under contract? Are the rumors about lawsuits true? Do you regret coming out? Are you still together? Jimin stopped walking. Jungkook too. The crowd hushed slightly. Jimin turned to face them, soaked through, rain sliding down his cheeks like tears he refused to shed. He took Jungkook's hand again. I'd do it all over again, he said. And then they disappeared into the rain. But the war wasn't over. Later that night, in a dimly lit bar away from the city's frenzy, Taehyung sat alone in a booth. His phone buzzed on the table. He didn't pick it up. A shadow slid into the seat across from him. It was a woman's sharp suit, expensive perfume. Lips curled into a knowing smile. I represent a group of investors, she said, and we've been watching everything very closely. Taehyung narrowed his eyes. And? We think it's time for new leadership at Hybe. He said nothing. We think you can help make that happen. He leaned forward, voice low. You're asking me to betray the company. I'm asking you, she said smoothly, to protect your brothers. Because believe me, if this goes to court, they won't survive what Hybe has prepared. Taehyung stared at her, the weight of it all pressing on his shoulders like a second skin. And then, he picked up his phone. His thumb hovered over a name in his contact list. Yoongi. But he didn't press it. Not yet. Because for the first time, the betrayal wasn't just in the boardroom. It was inside him, too. The rain hadn't stopped in 2 days. Outside Jimin's apartment, the sky loomed heavy, pressing against the city like a secret too large to keep. Inside, everything was still too still. The curtains were drawn, the floor covered in scattered papers and unopened letters, and on the table, 2 untouched mugs of coffee had gone cold hours ago. Jungkook sat on the edge of the couch, elbows on his knees, eyes fixed on the floor. Jimin leaned against the kitchen counter, phone in hand, screen lit with unread messages. Both of them were waiting, not for news, but for something more dangerous. A reaction. A war had been declared in silence, and the first shot hadn't yet been fired. Until now, the buzzer rang. Jimin's head snapped up. He didn't ask who it was. He knew. Seconds later, the door opened, and standing there, drenched from the storm, uniform collar damp and pressed flat to his neck, was Jin. His expression was unreadable. The eldest brother of BTS hadn't been seen publicly since his military enlistment. His surprise visit hit Jimin's chest like a punch of guilt and memory. He looked different now, tighter, sharper, but still carried the gravity of someone who knew how to lead a storm without becoming one. Jimin opened his mouth, but Jin walked past him without a word. He saw Jungkook, nodded once, then turned back to Jimin. You should have called me before this became a global crisis, he said, voice low. Jimin swallowed. I didn't know it would go this far. Jin's eyes flared. You didn't know? Jimin, you and Jungkook declared war on $1 billion machine that built you? You thought it would just adjust? I didn't want to be a lie anymore, Jimin said quietly. And I respect that, Jin replied. But you didn't just tell your truth. You told ours. You set a fire under all of us, every member, every trainee under the label, every staff member, depending on the fragile peace we've kept alive all these years. Jungkook stood. We never asked anyone to take sides. You didn't have to, Jin said. The world is already dividing for you. Jimin's jaw clenched. So what? We were supposed to keep hiding until the day we retired? Until it was safe to admit we were more than friends? Jin looked between the two of them, something shifting in his eyes, less anger, more sorrow. I'm not here to shame you, he said. I'm here to tell you the backlash hasn't even begun. Jimin frowned. What do you mean? Jin pulled a folded piece of paper from his pocket and placed it on the table. It was a printout, confidential. At the top, a letterhead with Hybe's insignia. Below, lines of legal jargon. At the bottom, signatures. Internal memos. They've drafted an emergency vote, Jin said. They're using breach of contract clauses and moral standards violations to potentially terminate both of you. Jungkook's fists balled at his sides. They wouldn't dare. They would, Jin said. Because they don't see two artists telling the truth. They see assets losing value. And they're already rallying board members to make it unanimous. Jimin stared at the document. They're trying to erase us. Jin nodded. And they're planning to make an example of you. Quietly. Legally. So no one ever does what you just did again. Jungkook took a step forward. Then we go public with everything. Emails, pressure, the silencing tactics. If they want a war, they'll get one. Jin raised a hand. No, you're thinking like a rebel, not a survivor. That's what they want. They want you to lash out so they can call you unstable, emotional, unfit for representation. Jimin's voice cracked. Then what do we do? Jin stared at them both for a long moment. Then softly, you wait, Jungkook snapped. For what? For them to bury us? No, Jin said, stepping closer. For them to overplay their hand. For the moment they slip, and the public sees who they really are. Jimin shook his head. People already think we're the villains. Not everyone, Jin said. There's already talk inside the company, employees resigning, sponsors threatening to pull out unless you're reinstated. Some people believe in you. But if you push too hard now, you'll lose them. The room fell into silence again. Jin walked toward the door. Before leaving, he turned back. I don't agree with everything you did, but I'm proud of you. Jimin blinked in surprise. Hyung, Jungkook began. Just remember, Jin said, cracking a rare smile. I didn't train you to survive all those years just to watch you fall now. He left. Jimin sat down heavily. Jungkook followed. The storm outside finally starting to slow. They said nothing for a while. Then Jimin asked, do you ever wish we could undo it? Jungkook looked at him for a long time. Eyes soft now, almost broken. No, he said. But I wish we didn't have to fight so hard just to exist. Jimin reached across the table, lacing their fingers together again. Then let's fight smart. Jungkook nodded. Let's finish what we started. In another part of Seoul, Taehyung stared at his phone again. This time, he made the call. Yoongi answered on the first ring. I think it's time, Taehyung said. We talk. Yoongi's voice was grave. Are you sure? No, Taehyung replied. But I know who the enemy is now. Somewhere, beneath the surface of idle smiles and corporate PR, a second war was beginning, one not of romance or scandal, but of power. And the ones who had always danced in silence were finally learning how to scream. It was nearly midnight when Yoongi arrived. The door to the underground studio creaked open, and the warmth of the mixing room wrapped around him like a forgotten song. Old posters, scribbled lyrics, dim amber lights it felt like home, and war all at once. Taehyung was already there, seated at the console, back rigid, staring at the waveform of a paused recording on the monitor. His hand hovered over the spacebar. He didn't look up when Yoongi entered, but the air shifted. Yoongi could feel it tension thick as cement. You said it couldn't wait, Yoongi said. It can't, Taehyung replied. He pressed play. The speakers crackled for a second. Then came a voice, calm, smug, familiar. It was Hybe's head of legal affairs. This is bigger than a couple of idols confessing their feelings. We control the narrative. If they push back, we break them. Quietly, legally, emotionally. They don't walk away heroes, they crawl away regrets. Yoongi's blood ran cold. The audio continued details of PR manipulation, internal coercion, name blacklisting plans. The voices in the recording spoke with surgical malice, like seasoned kings rearranging pawns. There was no hesitation, no conscience. It wasn't just about Jimin and Jungkook anymore. It was systemic. Yoongi turned slowly toward Taehyung. Where the hell did you get this? Taehyung leaned back, eyes hollow. A sound tech, loyal. He quit 3 weeks ago, said he couldn't stomach what they were planning. Yoongi rubbed his hands over his face. If this leaks, they'll burn. They deserve to. Yoongi sat. But so will we. This isn't just a scandal. This is a war crime in K-pop. This will destroy more than just Hybe. Taehyung's voice was sharp. Then, maybe it should. Yoongi looked up. I'm tired, Taehyung said. Tired of seeing them suffer for being honest. tired of pretending silence is protection. You think this stops at them? What happens when it's you next? Or me? Yoongi's fists clenched. I've lived in shadows for over a decade, Tae. I know what's at stake. Then you should be the first one standing beside them. Yoongi stared at the monitor, at the cruel curve of the waveform, at the proof of everything they feared but never dared say. His silence broke. I'll call Namjoon, he said. At the same time, across the city, Jimin was sitting in a hotel suite, not his, but one booked by a PR consultant who still believed in him, who whispered, "Stay hidden until the board votes are done." Jungkook paced restlessly. Why are we even hiding? We already told the world. We showed them. What else is there? There's survival, Jimin murmured. I don't want to survive, Jungkook snapped. I want to live. Then live with me, Jimin said, almost too quietly. Jungkook stopped moving. The weight of those words settled between them like glass. You still mean that? He asked. Jimin nodded. Jungkook walked over and sat beside him on the bed. He touched his hand gently, tracing the line of his knuckles. Even if we lose everything? I already did once, Jimin replied. When I lost you, their foreheads touched. There was no need for more, but the door buzzed. Jimin flinched. Jungkook stood. When he opened the door, Namjoon was standing there, rain-soaked, breathing hard, eyes wide with urgency. He stepped inside, locked the door, and didn't waste time. They have a recording, he said. Jimin straightened. What? Yoongi and Taehyung entered behind him, Taehyung holding a tablet like it was a loaded weapon. Namjoon continued. It's real. It's damning. And if we use it, they fall. Jimin swallowed. But, Namjoon hesitated. But if we release this, we can't go back. It won't just be the company. It'll be the industry. The whole ecosystem will see us as traitors. Yoongi added. And they'll come after every one of us, with everything they have. Jungkook stood taller. Then let them. Taehyung walked over to Jimin. This started with you. You walked out of that podcast. You ripped open the curtain. It ends with you too. Do we burn it all down? Jimin looked around the room. Namjoon, the leader who had carried them through fire. Yoongi, the soldier who hid storms behind his music. Taehyung, the friend who watched everything from the quiet shadows. And Jungkook. Always Jungkook. Jimin stepped forward, took the tablet, and stared at the screen. He pressed play. The voices began again. He didn't flinch this time. Then, with calm fingers, he hit upload. The screen flashed. Are you sure you want to post this to all platforms? Yes, Jimin whispered. Let the world hear what silence sounds like. Click. The upload began. And with it, the empire trembled. Far away, in the marble corridors of HYBE's executive wing, a notification pinged on every screen. Their secrets were no longer secrets, and the truth had finally found its voice. The video reached 1 million views in the first 23 minutes. By the end of the first hour, international headlines had exploded in every language. The hashtags flooded every platform like a revolution. HYBE exposed. Justice for Jimin and Jungkook. Let them speak. At first, the company responded with silence. Then came a terse, coldly worded statement. The recording released earlier today is incomplete, misleading, and illegally obtained. We are launching a full investigation and pursuing legal action against all parties responsible. The public didn't believe it. Comment sections were carnage. Screenshots of contract excerpts, old interviews, and past scandals were dragged back into the light. Former staff anonymously confirmed that the voice on the recording belonged to HYBE's chief of operations. Sponsors began pulling out, not from Jimin and Jungkook, but from HYBE. And inside the chaos, behind a locked door in a penthouse overlooking a city now split in two, the members gathered once again. Jimin sat cross-legged on the carpet, his phone buzzing beside him like a time bomb. Jungkook stood by the window, arms folded, watching the flashing lights of press vans down below. Yoongi was the first to speak. It's happening, exactly like we feared. Not like we feared, Taehyung said from the couch. Like they feared that people would finally stop swallowing the polished version. Namjoon paced, his face tighter than it had ever been, the weight of leadership sitting like armor on his shoulders. We've torn the veil. That's done. But now comes the consequence. Jimin looked up. Are we going to be erased? Yoongi answered without hesitation. They'll try. Jungkook turned from the window. Let them. They already did that to us for years. Namjoon stopped pacing. No, we don't fight by burning ourselves down. We fight by standing. He looked at Jimin. There's only one move left. You need to speak. Not in a post, not in a comment. A full press conference. Live. Raw. The truth. Jimin froze. Alone? Jungkook stepped forward. No. With me. There was a pause. And then Namjoon gave a nod. Then we control the story. Not them. The next morning was war. Flashes. Screams. Barricades. Fans pressed against glass, holding signs written in tearful marker ink. Reporters screamed questions that blurred into a constant white noise. Inside the auditorium, everything was white walls, floors, the podium. Minimal, controlled. But it couldn't mute the pulse in Jimin's throat, or the buzz in Jungkook's chest. The room fell silent the moment they stepped up. Jimin looked smaller than usual, yet impossibly tall. Jungkook stood beside him, no longer hiding, no longer behind the shield of stylists or silence. Jimin reached for the mic. I never imagined I'd be standing here under these circumstances, he began, voice calm but shaking at the edges. I've sung in arenas for millions, but today I speak as myself. He looked out. Cameras, microphones, flashing lights. I fell in love with someone who was never supposed to be more than my brother in music. But he became more, and I spent years hiding him and hiding myself to protect something I now know was never worth protecting. Jungkook spoke next. I got my tattoo to carry something we weren't allowed to say out loud. I wore silence like armor, but silence is also a cage. Jimin continued. We never asked to be role models. We only ever wanted to be artists. Humans. Honest. The silence that followed was thunderous. A reporter stood. Do you believe HYBE is responsible for emotional abuse? Jimin hesitated. Then, I believe they trained us to believe fear was loyalty. That silence was professionalism. And that love, any love, was a liability. Another voice. What do you say to fans who feel betrayed? Jungkook stepped up. We love you. We always have. And maybe we were scared of losing that love if we told the truth. But what we want now is to be loved for who we really are. Then came a different question, one that stopped them both. Is it true you considered leaving BTS? The room stiffened. Jimin looked at Jungkook, then back to the press. Yes, there was a sharp intake of breath from the crowd. I considered it every time I looked in the mirror and didn't recognize myself. Every time I had to lie on stage, in interviews, in lyrics. Every time I saw him suffer because of me. Jungkook's jaw clenched, but he said nothing. Jimin continued, his voice breaking now. But I stayed, because I love this group. I love this music, and I love him. He turned, fully, to Jungkook. In every version of my story, it was always you. Jungkook didn't blink. His voice cracked when he spoke. You were always mine. The room erupted not in anger, but applause. Some stood. Some cried. Some just stared, stunned, that after everything, the truth had survived. Hours later, in the silence of a rooftop, far away from the chaos, Jimin and Jungkook sat side by side on a bench, legs dangling over the edge, the city breathing below. Jungkook leaned his head on Jimin's shoulder. Do you think we'll be okay? Jimin closed his eyes. We're not okay yet. Then he turned, kissed his temple, and whispered, but we're finally real. The city felt louder now, like it was holding its breath between riots and revelations. Seoul's skyline, once their stage, had turned into a battlefield of billboards, either flickering with edited group shots or wiped completely clean. Some sponsors had returned, others remained silent. But the truth was no longer a whisper, it was thunder. Inside a small private recording studio tucked between alleyways in Itaewon, the 7 of them gathered for the first time in over a year. Namjoon sat with a journal open in front of him, pen tapping restlessly. Jin, still technically under service, had pulled strings just to be there. Taehyung leaned against the wall with crossed arms, expression unreadable. Yoongi stood by the window, scrolling through his phone, reading the latest threads about the collapse and rebirth of their legacy. Jae-ho paced slowly in the back, muttering a melody under his breath, like music was the only way he knew how to hold it all in. Jungkook and Jimin walked in last, hand in hand. No more pretending, no more coded glances. They were tired of performing anything that wasn't truth. No one spoke for a long time. Then Jin broke the silence. So what now? Jimin glanced at Jungkook before answering. Now we decide if we rebuild or walk away. Taehyung scoffed lightly. Rebuild what? A brand that tried to silence half of us? A system that labels us as risks instead of artists? Yoongi didn't look up from his phone. They've offered mediation, he said. Behind closed doors, no press, no cameras, just us and them. Namjoon laughed bitterly. Of course they have. They want to sweep it all back under the rug they kept us under for a decade. Jungkook sat forward. Then we don't let them. If they want peace, it's on our terms. What are our terms? Hobie asked quietly. A public apology? Ownership rights? Leadership changes? Because they'll offer lip service. And then in 6 months, another idol will disappear into depression, or scandal, or exile. And it'll happen all over again. I want control, Jimin said. Of my name, my music, my body, my narrative. Everyone looked at him. I don't care if I'm not in the magazines anymore. He continued, voice steady. I care if I wake up and hate myself because I chose silence over love. Jin nodded slowly. Then we demand it. Together. The meeting with Hybe was scheduled that same week, but it didn't take place in a boardroom. Jimin had insisted it be in the old trainee studio, the one with cracked mirrors and the smell of dust and desperation in the corners. The place they'd once sweated and cried and collapsed in, long before the glitz, the cameras, or the pain. The executives arrived late. When they entered, it was 7 against 5. And this time, the 5 looked scared. The CEO, a new face, younger, less sure, cleared his throat. First, we'd like to begin by acknowledging no speeches, Namjoon said. Just answers. Yoongi stepped forward and laid a folder on the table. Inside, documented evidence, signatures, timelines, testimonies. We're not here for your approval, he said. We're here for accountability. Taehyung's eyes burned as he added, and if we don't get it here, we'll get it in court. Or in front of every camera in South Korea. The youngest executive, shaking slightly, looked directly at Jimin. Why did you do it? Why now? Jimin met her eyes. Because someone finally asked the wrong question. Silence. And then the first surrender. We're prepared to negotiate full creative ownership, one of the board members offered. No, Jungkook said. Not just ownership, a platform. Everyone turned. He stood tall, shoulders square. For every trainee who was told they couldn't be who they were, for every idol crushed by image, we want a space to protect the truth, not just ours. All of it. The CEO exhaled slowly. That's not small. What you're asking for is unprecedented. So was telling the world we loved each other, Jimin said. The room grew quiet, and in that quiet, for once, there was no fear. Only choice. 3 weeks later, the headlines shifted. Jimin and Jungkook to co-found Vocal Truth, a creative safe label for artists. Hybe restructures after scandal. Executives step down. From idols to icons. BTS speaks, and the industry listens. But none of that mattered in the same way anymore. What mattered was the music. On the anniversary of the night, Jimin walked out of that podcast. He and Jungkook took the stage. No backup dancers, no elaborate sets, just a piano, a mic, and 2 voices that had once been drowned in fear, now trembling with power. Jimin looked at the crowd and whispered into the mic, "This is for the ones who stayed silent. You don't have to anymore." Jungkook followed with a single line that left the audience breathless. "And this tattoo?" He pulled back his sleeve. It wasn't ink, it was survival. The lights dimmed. The final chorus began. And in that moment, they weren't idols. They weren't scandals. They weren't even soldiers in a war. They were 2 boys on a rooftop under summer stars, promising the world they would never disappear again. And this time, they kept it.